Today's forum is a conversation with comedian and motivational speaker and humanitarian Tom Dreesen and moderated by our own Renaissance music class leader, Mike Agron. Tom is a well-respected and very funny comedian who's appeared over 500 times on national television, including 60 appearances on The Tonight Show, 50 appearances of The Late Show with David Letterman, and was Frank Sinatra's opening act for 14 years. Mike and Tom will discuss the importance of humor, how it's evolved, and many other interesting topics. This talk was booked during the lockdown, and since then, Tom has begun touring again, and that conflicted with today's forum, unfortunately. So Mike and Tom recorded this last week. Even though Tom couldn't make it here today, we're sure you're going to enjoy what he and Mike produced for you. Now here's Tom and Mike.
Well, thank you, Forum Committee, for having us. I am honored to have the opportunity to speak with my good friend, Tom Dreesen, and we're going to get started in just a moment. I'll tell you a little bit about how I got started with Tom. Actually, he came out with a book about a year or so ago, and I was doing my class on Sinatra. And knowing that this is the guy that not only made Sinatra laugh, but he's also the person that opened for him for 14 years, I said, I have to have him. And I contacted a friend who had worked with him to do a webinar he did. And Tom was so gracious. Not only did he come on and do an interview on This is Sinatra, he also worked with me on my Celebrating Late Night, which he has perfect credentials for. So I'm going to bring Tom on in just a second. But before I do, for some of you who may not be familiar with his work, I put together a little sizzle reel that I'd like to show you.
I'm waiting for a bus. You're going to be another black man.
Uh-huh.
You're going to come up and start a conversation. Now I'm waiting for the bus.
You waiting for the bus?
Yeah.
And I'm a brother.
Your brother. Cool now.
My next guest is a good friend, a very talented comedian. As a matter of fact, Steve Allen has an entire chapter about him in his new book entitled Funny People. And that's what he is.
My next guest is a good friend of mine, a wonderful comedian.
Tom Dreesen as the best of the new comics.
A really personal favorite of mine. This guy, among the new comedians, is young and gifted. He is touring the country right now with Frank Sinatra.
Good mind on him. He's funny. Did I say that twice? Oh, good. Well, he is. Would you welcome Tom Dreesen? Tom?
Tommy, come out and take another bow. Tom Dreesen, ladies and gentlemen. There he is. That's my man. My number one man.
So without further ado, I would like to bring on Tom Dreesen. So Tom, if you'd go ahead and step to the front of the camera, we'll bring you on and we'll start our conversation.
I'm on.
Hey, how you doing, Tom?
I'm doing great.
Boy, you're on the road. That's so wonderful that you're back on the road again. I know that when we planned to do this, we were still somewhat in lockdown, and I'm thrilled that you're on the road. Where are some of the places you've been going?
I performed in Las Vegas, and I went to Chicago and did some shows. Then I came back here. Then I went to Las Vegas and did my one-man show, The Man Who Made Sinatra Laugh. And then I came back and I went to Kansas City and did the same show in Kansas City, The Man Who Made Sinatra Laugh. Then I went to Chicago to do a corporate date. And I came back here, and now I leave again Friday for Miami to board a ship in Fort Lauderdale to do my one-man show on the cruise ship, along with a lot of other 50s acts, the Righteous Brothers and Jay and the Americans and the Drifters and Little Anthony and Gladys Knight and the Pips, all those. It's going to be a fun week for me,
Sure sounds like a fun week. Well, we're delighted to have you, and thank you so much again to take the time to tape this with us today. I know we would have loved to have done this live, but because of your travel, we all understand. Let's get started at the beginning. When we were looking at some of the clips of you on The Tonight Show, David Letterman, Merv Griffin, a lot's changed since you were on the air initially with humor. But humor is such an important part of our experiences and what we do. Why don't you take a moment and, for the benefit of our audience, share with them how you define humor how you look at humor, how humor has changed over the years. And maybe if we have some time at the end, we'll take a look at some of your early clips you did, and you can talk about them. So I'll turn it back to you to talk about humor.
Well, you know, it's always a great question. What is humor? It's what makes you laugh. Whatever makes you laugh, that's what humor is. You know, it's so personal. It's so subjective. I just put a light on there because I thought I was in the shadow there. But it's what makes you laugh, you know. And who's the funniest person in the world? It's the person that makes you laugh. It might be your Aunt Edna, your Uncle Clyde, you know, whoever makes you laugh. I once was on a panel show with 5 other comedians, and Dinah Shore said to me, "Who's the funniest person in America?" I said, "Don Polizzi." She said, "I never heard of him." I said, "Well, he's my cousin. But when he walks into a room, I can't stop laughing." That humor is so subjective. It's what makes you laugh, you know. There is only one rule. Whenever I give motivation talks to comedians, to corporate America and to universities and high schools, but I give them a specific one to comedians called The Joy of Stand-Up Comedy and How to Get There. And oftentimes you know, when I talk to them about, you know, what a sense of humor is, there's really only one rule in comedy, you know, be funny. That's the only rule. Now, are there parameters? Depends what show you're on, depends what audience you're is, you know, but there should be no blockage to whatever a comedian wants to say, no matter how political, no matter how crude. We have the First Amendment that we have a right to say whatever we want to say. Thousands of men and women died, so we had that right. Now, that's what separates America from other countries in most cases. We can say whatever we want to say. Now, you don't have to listen to us. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater, but you don't have to listen to us. You can turn us off. You can ask for your money back. But you can't stop Americans from saying whatever they want to say. That's what the First Amendment is all about. And the government today is not trying to do that, but social media is. The Facebooks and the Twitters and the Instagrams. And, you know, a guy sitting down in his basement will say, "I don't like Mike Agron," or "I don't like Tom Dreesen," and he starts writing the most horrible things about you. He has that right as well. But what they do, then they can form a mob mentality and come to your club and picket you or tell the owner not to hire you, you know, that sort of thing. That's how comedy has changed so much today because of the politically correct police, whoever they are. And by the way, no one knows who they are. They don't have an organization. They don't have a 12-story building with all their offices in it, you know, and we don't know who they are. We know who the Republicans are. We know who the Democrats are. We know who the Moose, the Kiwanis, the Elks, the B'nai B'rith. We know who the Ku Klux Klan is, but we don't know who these people are who keep trying to shut comedians up, you know. So that was a long answer to a very short question.
Well, you know, it kind of triggers something that I've often thought about. You know, if we go back to that great musical, the Gene Kelly, Debbie Reynolds, and Donald O'Connor musical, Singing in the Rain, one of the songs that Donald sang was "Make 'Em Laugh." And then fast forward maybe 20 years to That's Entertainment. And I remember the tagline, "Boy, do we need it now." So with that, and with what you just said, and with humor, why is it so important to make someone laugh? And how do you make someone laugh? I mean, I know there's all different types of humor. I'd like you to unpack that a little bit. And let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, if you sometimes when you dissect comedy, it gets boring. But if you're writing a joke, the setup line must hide the punchline. Comedy is 9/10 surprise. The audience laughs because they didn't think you're going to say that or do that. So the setup line has to hide the punchline. And the other rule is there are no victimless jokes. Who's the victim? Me, the society, the airlines, the government. You know, somebody could be, my daughter's dating a punk rocker, and you know, maybe I'm the victim in that joke, or maybe he is. You know, so that's basically what a joke is when you're writing a joke, and also knowing how to edit, how to take the fat out of the joke. George Burns was one of the great ones at this. You could give him a joke that was a minute long, and he could make it funny probably in 20 seconds. Take the fat out of the joke, you know. But to go back to why it's so important is, when I lecture young comedians and give talks to young comedians, I tell them, you do not know how important you are. You don't know how special you are. You know that if you go around the world, and the insurance companies of America went around the world for 8 years on the basic fears of mankind. Death was fourth, pain was second, getting up in front of an audience was the number one fear of mankind. If you can get up in front of an audience as a house painter or a lawyer or a doctor, and you can speak for half an hour, you're in less than 1% of the population of the world. But if you can get up and make people laugh for an hour, you're in less than 1/1,000,000th of 1% of the population of the world. And I tell the comedians, that's the gift you've been given. You've worked hard to develop it and take it to its maximum potential, but that you can make people laugh. You know how special you are? Do not destroy that with drugs and alcohol and everything to destroy this mind. And so I tell them how important. Now, the reason why you're important, why humor is so important 1,000 years ago and why it is important today. Whenever the human being laughs, we've always known that laughter is psychologically a deterrent, that the brain can't think of two thoughts at the same time. So if you're watching a comedian or listen to a comedy album, you're not thinking of your problems. And so because the brain can function two thoughts at the same time. Now, the other thing is because of a man named Norman Cousins, who was the editor of Saturday Review. The doctors told him he was dying of a terminal illness. He was in the hospital. They said to him, you have a heart condition and you don't have long to live. They said it was caused from years of negative input, stress. He laid in the hospital and he said, if negative input made me ill, then positive input should make me well. So he checked out of the hospital. He'd only watch I Love Lucy reruns, Candid Camera, Three Stooges, The Marx Brothers, and on and on and on. And he wouldn't watch the evening news, and you don't listen to funny things. He lived 27 years after the doctors told him he was going to die. Because of him, UCLA did research on what happens to the body when a human being laughs, a hearty laugh. When you have that hearty laugh, you've laughed so hard, tears are running down your eyes, and you go, oh, and that sense of well-being comes over you. They found that the brain releases endorphins into the bloodstream after a hearty laugh. So these chemicals go through the bloodstream. So laughter, a chemical change comes over your body. So laughter is not only psychologically a deterrent, it's physiologically therapeutic. So comedians are physicians of the soul. And I don't want you to call me Dr. Dreesen, but I tell the kids, that's how important you are. You have this gift to bring healing to the world. If what you do for a living is a service to humanity, then you're in the right profession. If what you do, if it's a service to you or to your ego, then you're not, but a service to humanity.
Well, Tom, I know from reading your book and knowing you that you grew up on the south side of Chicago in a suburb called Harvey, Illinois, and you did a lot of interesting different jobs. When did you first realize that you were funny, that you can make people laugh? Do you remember what that was?
I can remember as an early age, when I shined shoes in all the taverns in my neighborhood, my uncle owned a bar and he used to tell jokes behind the bar. And that fascinated me, that with his inflection and his timing, he could cause this sound to come out of people's body and it filled the air, the room like electricity filled the air and unite everybody. Everybody was in on it and it made them all feel good at one time. And that fascinated me. So I could always tell a funny story. I think I told you one time, I used to tell some of his jokes, many that should not be told on a Catholic school playground. but as I got older, I was always a funny storyteller. And even in the service, that my 4 years in the Navy, that I was always the guy that could tell a joke, or I could watch an incident that happened aboard ship or out in the field or wherever we were. When I was in this Marine Corps unit, I served in a Marine Corps unit for 9 months too. But I could recreate that and maybe add a funny punchline. I didn't ever think I'd ever be a comedian. It was the furthest thing from my mind, But Tim Reed and I was in the JCs back in Harvey, Illinois, when I came out of the service, and I joined the civic group, the JCs, and they attacked the problems of the community, and in doing so, gave you leadership training. Any problems were in the community, you would form a committee. You'd serve on the committee, or you'd chair the committee, and you set up subcommittees. You learn you would attack this problem and get leadership training at the same time. One of the problems of the community were our youth using drugs. So I wrote a drug education program teaching grade school children, 8th graders, the ills of drug abuse. I wanted to get them before they went into high school. In those days, they weren't teaching drug education at a college or a high school level, let alone at an elementary school level. Helping me with the project was a young black man named Tim Reed, who graduated from Norfolk State College. E.I. DuPont recruited him into Chicago as a marketing rep, and he joined the JCs. And the very first night, said, I want to work with you on that project. We worked on it, went into the classrooms. The program became very successful. JCs use it as a model program, how to teach drug education at an elementary school level. And they, through all of their publications in 50 states and in 22 foreign countries. One day, you know, because we made the kids laugh. I would say funny things, Tim would say funny things. We played some music, got the kids relaxed, and then we planted the seeds. One day, a little 8th grade girl leaving the classroom said, "You guys are funny. You ought to become a comedy team." And the thought of a black-white comedy team intrigued us. This was September 1969. No one had ever done that before. No, there was never a black-white comedy team before. And there's never been one since. There were a couple that tried it after Tim and I tried it, but we were the first American black and white comedy team, and history shows we were the last from 1969 to 1975. So, and then learning, those days there were no comedy clubs. So you had to work what they call the Chitlin circuit, black-owned, black-operated nightclubs. The 20 Grand in Detroit, the High Chaparral in Chicago, the Burning Spear, the Cotton Club, the Dating Club Lounge, Sugar Shack in Boston, the Club Harlem in Atlantic City before they had gambling, a whole circuit, where I'd be the only white guy within miles. Then we'd work all white clubs, you know, the Playboy circuit and everything, you know, where Tim would be the only black person. And we learned, you know, timing and how to write comedy. We were novices, but we were both salesmen. I sold life insurance, and Tim was a marketing rep for EI DuPont. So we knew how to sell, but we didn't know how to write yet. And we trial and error and mistake. And again, there were no comedy clubs in those days. And you know, we met with a lot of resistance. You know, if there was a black guy who didn't like white people, he wasn't mad at me. He was mad at Tim for being mad at me. You know, if there was a white guy who didn't like black people, he wasn't mad at Tim. He was mad at me for being with Tim. You know, but we got over all that. You know, and stayed together, and we're the best of friends to this day.
You know, when you talk about that, I also have a background in sales, and I think that one of the things you learn about being in sales is you don't get paid to take yes, you get paid to take no. I mean, a lot of rejection. You probably will hear no 99 times before you hear a yes. I can only imagine what it would be like in comedy to get up there and bury yourself and not get a laugh, and just, as they say, dying up there. What is that like? How did you overcome that? How did both of you guys put yourself out there to find what would work and not give up? Because I think that's such an important part of life, is not giving up through and taking adversity and learning how to push through it.
In any endeavor, and in selling, you learn that. I remember if I sent out 100 letters, I'd only get 3. You know, 100 letters direct mail, I'd only get 3 responses. You know, and if I talk to 20 people to sell them life insurance, and I the first, say 8 in a row said no, but the 9th one did, and I started realizing that I could sell every 6th person or something. So whenever I got a no, I knew I was one no closer to a yes. You know, that philosophy. You know, and Tim had the same sales background, so rejection was part of it. If you're in this business, in show business especially, I mean any business, but show business, and you can't handle rejection. Harry Truman said, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. You know, I was rejected. My book is called Still Standing, because I'm a stand-up comedian for 51 years now. But I've been knocked down a lot in my life. As you know, if you read the book, physically knocked down and got back up again. I kept getting back up again, you know, and that's really what it's all about. It's all about, if you believe in yourself, and Tim and I believe that we could become, or at least I felt that way in the early days, the best comedy team America had ever seen. That was our goal. We set goals, you know, and then those rejections, we would look over it and say, okay, what did we do wrong? How could we change this? You know, maybe we put that piece of material at the beginning of the show rather than at the end of the show. You learn these things by trial and error, editing and placement of material, and you know.
Could you give us an example of one of your first jokes or one of your first routines? Do you remember what you tried out and how you polished it and molded it to come out to be funny the way you wanted it to?
We had so many routines, but one was, excuse me, one was where Tim was teaching me to be black, you know, and ironically, I grew up in a black neighborhood in Harvey, Illinois. You know, I had so many black friends. I played football on an all-black football team. I played basketball on an all-black basketball team. And I did jokes about that on the Tonight Show. You know, I have an album out in front of an all-black audience called That White Boy Is Crazy, back in my neighborhood. And anyhow, but Tim, we did a routine about that. Tim was going to show me how to be black in this black neighborhood. And years later, after we did that routine several times, 100 times around the country, Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder did a movie and did that almost the same kind of bit. You know, I think it was called The Silver Streak.
Silver Streak, yeah, right.
We were doing that bit live. You know, a lot of people tried to do things like that in film, you know, but we went out into the belly of the beast in the north and the south and all the tough places, again, where I'd be the only white guy. I'll give you a quick example of okay, I'm the only white guy at the Club Harlem. There's like 1,200 people in this club that we're performing at, and it's our first time there, and all the acts are black. And the MC is going to introduce us. And now, how do we walk out there, a black guy and a white guy, without, you know, getting some sort of reaction right away? We'd get their attention right away. So I decided this is what we're going to do. The guy said, "Ladies and gentlemen, there's a comedy team from Chicago. Will you please welcome the team of Tim and Tom?" And Tim went out by himself. "We're really happy to be here. Thank you very much. We just got in from Chicago. We were going to take a train here, but we decided," and pretty soon people saying, "We?" He's up there by himself. And slowly, stage left, I start coming out. And the spotlight hit me. And I was slowly going way over stage left. And they go, "Uh-oh, what do we got here? What's going on here?" It's a white boy in this situation. We turned it into something funny, where I finally wandered up to him. He said, "Where have you been?" I said, "I don't see any of my people out there." He said, "No, I don't think there's any of your people out there." I said, "Well, we better be funny." He said, "What do you mean, we, white man?" You know, and biggest laugh. You take that situation and you turned it into a joke, into a funny situation.
But, you know, it sounds like, of course, in working with you before, that so much of what you do is more around storytelling rather than just a quick punchline. And I think probably you learned a lot of that from sales and you know, working in insurance. Can you give an example of how you would use storytelling to weave some humor into it?
Well, here's a excuse me. Here's the thing about, you say short jokes. I always was a storyteller, and I love telling stories. And that's when you have the time, I can build the story and come to that ending. When you went on the Tonight Show, you know, you had to do a new 6 minutes each time you did the Tonight Show, you know, and you couldn't do two guys going to bar jokes. It had to be original monologues. I would take my tape recorder to the Comedy Store, to the Improvisation, to the Laugh Factory, night after night, trying out new material. Because I ended up, as you know, doing 61 appearances on the Tonight Show. So you had to keep coming up with new material. But I used to get 22 to 26 laughs from this piece of material before I knew it was done. It was ready for the Tonight Show. So I had to get to the punchline quicker, a little bit quicker, you know, than going out there in my nightclub act. I do a 90-minute show now, The Man Who Made Sinatra Laugh. I can let the story build. I can take my time. You know, when somebody tells you you only have a 5-minute spot, you know, on any kind of show, either television or in live, you've got to learn how to edit and you know, get to the punchline quicker. If you're telling a story, you know, if 10 comedians are in an audience watching you, Mike, and you're telling a story, and we're waiting for that punchline, there's a certain point where all of us comedians look at one another with that look, this better have a hell of an ending, as you've now taken us on a long journey. So it better have a killer ending, you know. So that, again, that's all by trial and error, by learning, by trying that out. If you want to go do a 6-minute story, go do it. But you'll learn what worked and what didn't work, you know, and then eventually you'll hone it down.
You know, one of the things I personally always found humorous with anybody is self-deprecating humor. It's more natural, it's more authentic. I think that for someone to get up and tell a joke who's not a comedian, it's pretty risky. But you've had that experience of doing both. And I know you would, I'd love for you to share the story of when you opened up, particularly for a lot of the acts you did. Very, very, I mean, you know, Sammy Davis Jr., Smokey Robinson, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Mac Davis. I mean, it goes on and on and on. I think you even opened up for Elton John. But of course, my favorite, full disclosure, was Sinatra. And I could not imagine, because I had seen him enough in concert to know that you wanted to see the man, okay? Whoever else was on before him, good luck. How did you handle that? How did you use self-deprecating humor to win the audience over and warm them up and be able to get them to be with you for the 15 or 20 minutes you had until he came out?
Well, first of all, self-deprecating humor. An old vaudevillian many years ago when I was brand new, he was an old guy in his 90s. He told me, when you walk out on stage, son, the first 2 jokes are on you. You know, I tell that to public speakers all the time. You're going to give a speech in front of your company or whatever it is, and you're real nervous about it. Tell them something dumb you did to open the story. That immediately says to them, you know, oh my God, he's just like us. I've made mistakes like that too. A sense of humor, by my humble definition, is not when you have the ability to laugh at others' shortcomings or misfortunes. It's when you have the ability to laugh at yourself. People will love you for that. Audiences love you for that. When you don't have to do like Rodney, do an hour of I get no respect, you know, but open your talks or open your thing with something dumb you did. Opening for Frank Sinatra. It's one thing opening for Frank in the casinos where as you pointed out, I opened for Sammy Davis in those casinos, for Smokey Robinson, Natalie Cole, Gladys Knight, the Pips, Mac Davis, Tony Orlando and Don, Frankie Avalon, James Darren. I've opened for so many acts in those casinos. I knew that stage. I knew how to maneuver and how to get them going. Opening for Sinatra is a totally different animal. He appeared in 20,000 seat arenas and 40,000 in Hawaii. Now there's 20,000 people in that arena and you're in the middle of it. You know, they're behind you. They're to your right and to your left, in front of you. It's not proscenium where everybody's in front of you. They're all around you. This is a totally different dynamic. So when you walk out there, first of all, if there's 20,000 seat arena, 20,000 people, 3,000 are trying to find their seats when you're going on stage. Second of all the lights would go down in the arena and people go, ooh, and the orchestra was in a pit and they'd say, ba, ba, da, da, ba. People go, ah. And they say, and now the comedy star of our show, people go, oh, you know, because they think Frank is coming out. So you walk out, I walk out and I say, how many of you out there, applaud, I want you to applaud. How many of you out there thought Frank Sinatra was coming out? Applaud. And they'd applaud. You know, I'd say, I know just how you feel. I'm a little bit disappointed myself. You know, the joke is on me, you know. Now, the other thing that I did there, I didn't say raise your hand. I said applaud. I talk, you react. I talk, you react. And then I would say, how many of you are in this arena for your very first time? Applaud. I'd do that again. They'd applaud. I'd say, how many of you are seeing Frank Sinatra live your very first time? Applaud. And they'd applaud. And I'd say, how many of you aren't wearing any underwear? Some throwaway joke. They'd applaud. You see, I talk, you react. I'm bringing them into my aura now. I didn't do my A material. I just did throwaway lines. I'm getting them. Again, I didn't say raise your hand. I said applaud. I talk, you react. I'm doing that all around me. Now I've got them react. They're focused on me now. Okay. And then I write a couple jokes, whatever town we're in, about Louisville, Kentucky, or about Cincinnati, Ohio. I'd have a couple local jokes that I had written, you know, I'd researched and written about the local mayor, the local problems. And then when I really got them going, then I went into my A material. You know, but it was luckily I was experienced when I met Frank.
Yes. And so in doing that, you learned how to warm up the audience, how to disarm them, how to make them feel comfortable with you without overpowering them with humor or with comedy. I mean, with jokes. You showed yourself. I think those are really important lessons for any of us who do any public speaking. And I think, you know, public speaking is not just necessarily to 40,000 people or 200 people. It's to one other person. And I think it's just, I think one of the things that I've enjoyed in working with you, and, you know, as I said to you before, I find it a master's class in communication skills in hearing your stories and how you do things is how you connect with people, how you relate with people. And so that had to be something that, you know, I don't think you could have opened up for Sinatra, you know, right after you were on the Tonight Show. It took a lot of time and grade. It took a lot of practice to be able to go out there and to know how to handle the audience. So once you use that to win them over, how did you then, can you give an example of how you would go into some of your A material, how you would build up to it, and maybe what some of that was?
Well, what I would do once I knew that I had them focused on me, and I told you I'd do a couple of local jokes about the community. Any public speaker should know this. If you're walking out and if there was something that you're in the city of Cincinnati or whatever, and there was something that happened there that was in all the news that the whole audience would know about it, you can do a relating joke off of that. You can say, you know, it's so great to be here in the city of Cincinnati, or as you locals call it, the city of potholes, or whatever is the biggest problem. And they know, then you familiarize yourself with their city. After that, then I would go into what Jack Benny taught me many years ago. When you first start out, tell the audience, start writing material about where you're from, your brothers and sisters, your mom and dad, whatever, where you went to school. Your first 8 or 10 minutes is about introducing yourself to these strangers. All the Tonight shows I did, every time I go out there, there's many people who still have no idea who I am. I mean, when I go headline my own shows, they came because they know who I am. But when you're opening for Frank, you can't assume that everybody knows. So you introduce yourself to the audience with material, with funny material about where you're from. You know, let me digress. I met Jack Benny many years ago. I was in the business about 4 months, and a guy named Irv Kupson, a columnist from Chicago, had a show called The Lively Art of Conversation or something. And he had me on with Jack Benny. And Jack gave me a lot of advice. But one of the things he told me, he said, Tommy, when you first walk out on the Tonight Show, now the Tonight Show was the furthest thing from my mind in those days. He said, your first 6 minutes is about you. They don't introduce yourself to strangers. If you walk out and do a joke, you know, first of all, they don't even know who you are yet. You know, let them know who you are through comedy. You know, I had 8 brothers and sisters. I went to Catholic school. I played basketball on an all-black basketball team. I introduced myself to the audience with the first 6 or 7 minutes. Now they kind of know me, you know, more. And then you went into whatever jokes you were doing, the government, the airlines, or whatever you know, my daughter's dating a punk rocker or whatever, you know. But first, those first jokes, I tell all new comedians, the first 10 minutes you write is about you. Mike, there's never been anyone on this planet like you before. No one's had your same mom and dad. No one's had your same childhood experiences. No one. You're unique as a snowflake. You really are. Every human being is. And I tell comedians that. That's what you let them know who you are, where you're from, through your comedy material, and then later go into whatever your point of view is as a comedian. You know?
So getting your point of view as a comedian, let's go back a little bit. I know that you, as you said, you worked with Tim, you did local gigs, you worked wherever you could. You went on the Chitlin circuit, as you said. Eventually, you found your way out to Hollywood, and you were very involved in the Comedy Store. How did that experience shape you? And share with some of the people that you were on stage with at that time, because they're pretty well known today, and some of the things that you learned. And then I'd like to, after that, kind of walk in how you finally decided to get the nerve to audition for the Tonight Show, and how you got on all these late night shows. So let's kind of go to the Comedy Store and talk about how you honed your craft. What are some of the things you did there?
Well, to start with, in 1969, Tim Reed and I became a comedy team. In 1975, the team split up, or early 1975. And much to my chagrin, it broke my heart. Tim wanted to be more of an actor, and some other situations that became, like I say, we're still the best of friends today, and we were then. But now I have a choice. What am I going to do? I never went on stage by myself ever. I went on stage with Tim Reed for almost 6 years. And so now what am I going to do? And I just decided I'm going to become a stand-up comedian. I made up my mind that's what I was going to do. And I set goals, as I always did, even in life. You know, I've read literally hundreds of books on the powers of the mind. As you know, I'm a motivational speaker. And so I started applying these sciences. I made up my mind that I was going to go it alone. And the first thing I do is, what's your goal? In 1975, wherever you went in America, people say, what do you do for a living? I said, you say, I'm a stand-up comedian. The next question out of their mouth was, oh yeah? Have you ever been on Johnny Carson? In the eyes of America, if you hadn't been on Carson, you weren't a comedian. Now, you know, you might want to be one or going to be one, but you weren't one now. So Johnny Carson moved from New York in 1972 out to the West Coast. And now all of a sudden, any comic, Freddie Prinze appeared on his show one time, got a sitcom the next day. Everybody knew 26 million people watched that show in those days. So one appearance on the Tonight Show, and your life is going to change if you score. Now, the way to get there, come out to the West Coast. The Comedy Store at that time was the only game in town for comedians. There wasn't the Improvisation, Laugh Factory. They weren't there at that time, just the Comedy Store on Sunset Boulevard. And all the talent coordinators from all the shows were coming to the Comedy Store to look at these new young comedians because comedy became the rock and roll of the 70s. It was the hottest thing going. You have to, the woman that owned it, Mitzi Shore, had to approve of you before she'd put you on. Many came out here and Mitzi didn't approve of them and they went back to Toledo or to wherever they were from, to Bangor, Maine, you know, because if Mitzi didn't like you, there was no other place hardly to be exposed and where the talent coordinators would come. So I had to wait in line and you know, for almost a month before I got a chance to do 5 minutes in front of her. And luckily she liked me and I became a regular. I worked my way up from working at 1 o'clock in the morning till midnight to working at 11 and finally working prime time. But I'm on stage every night with all these unknown comedians, Robin Williams, David Letterman, Jay Leno, Gallagher, Michael Keaton. The girl waiting tables was Deborah Winger. I mean, all these young guys and girls, Elaine Boozler, brilliant young woman comedian, all these guys and girls, they came with material, they came focused and they watched each other work and all that stuff. So that's what got my work ethic helped me a great deal. But also the deep inside passion that I wanted to be a comedian. I knew the first time I ever got a laugh on stage that this was what I came here to do. You know, I wandered aimlessly for years on jobs all over. As you know, I was a bartender, I was a truck driver, I was a bricklayer. I mean, I was a bricklayer's helper. I did a lot of construction work. Photography in my brother's business, selling life insurance in the end. But none of these fulfill me like when I get a laugh. And to this day, you know, that's the joy of joys, is making people laugh. So I was determined, I had the passion. And then what you do is, when you're there, you find out through other comedians, when you hang out in that community, how do you get on the Tonight Show? Well, you got to get these people to come and see you. And they would give you names: Craig Tennis, Bob Dolce, Paul Block, Howard Papish. These were the coordinators from the Tonight Show. So I began to, you know, try to get in contact with them, for them to come and see me when I felt that I was ready. That's the other thing too. You know, you can never be too late, but you can be too soon, you know, with stand-up comedy. And I figured out a way to get to those guys. And I did a very funny thing. We don't have time now for me to tell you how I got them interested in me, but it was a very funny trick I pulled on. And I got them to come and see me. And Craig Tennis saw me one night. I was auditioning with a new kid named Billy Crystal. And I've
heard of him.
Yeah. I don't know what Billy's doing today, but
yeah,
I'm with Mike in his class right now. So it shows you I made the right choice. Anyhow, long story short, I finally got Craig Tennis to come and see me. He said to me, okay, come to my office. I saw you do 20 minutes. Come to my office tomorrow. I went to his office. He said, show me what 5 minutes you would do if I gave you the Tonight Show. I watched your material last night. And I told him I do this bit, that bit. He said, okay, take that one bit out, put something else in it. And finally he said, okay, you're on. You're on next Tuesday, a week from today. I prepared, got it all ready, went there and got bumped. Prepared, they ran out of time. Prepared, went there, they ran out of time. Three times in a row they bumped me. The fourth time I went there, I'm in the makeup room and Fred DeCordova walked in. He said, I got bad news for you. I said, what? He said, you're going on tonight. 26 million people watch that show. If you score here, you're on your way. If you don't score, even my mother had everybody back in Harvey, Illinois watching the show. If I bomb, I can't even go back home. You know? The pressure is enormous. It's hard to describe standing behind that curtain, waiting to walk out in front of 26 million people and Johnny Carson and everybody in the industry, knowing that this is like that song that Whitney Houston did, and a girl named Dana Winter does it now, called That One Moment in Time. There's a line in that line where I'm standing behind that curtain and I'm gonna walk 10 feet out and hit that mark on the floor. And when I hit that mark, as the song goes, all of my dreams are a heartbeat away and the answers are all up to me. And this is that moment. I mean, and as you know, I ended up scoring at night, thank God. And I got 8 applause and Johnny called me back. I said goodnight, everybody. I went through the curtain. Johnny called me back out. Take another bow. And I took another bow and he gave me that circle. And I never stopped working since that night.
You know, I was just thinking, I think it might be fun if we just take a little diversion right now. Why don't we take a look at a few clips that you did from the early days? Let's kind of show a couple of them, talk about them. why it worked then, what was funny then, and how it would play today, and what are some of the lessons learned. Would you be up for that, Tom?
Sure. I cringe, to be honest with you. I cringe when I look at myself 45 years ago on the Tonight Show, 40 years, because I just cringe. First of all, because I'm so much older than that kid. And the other thing is that there's material that I did in those days I wouldn't do today. But again, they kept calling me back, so I kept coming up with material. But yeah, just go up. I'd be glad to visit with you.
All right, let me fast forward here, and let's see, I've got a couple here. I've got something on Catholic jokes from the Tonight Show. I've got marijuana jokes from the Tonight Show. I've got political humor from the Tonight Show. Which one of these would you like me to start with?
Well, you could go to the Catholic jokes and then go to the political humor. I would think.
All right, let's do that. Let me bring that up. Which one do you want me to pick? Nuns fashions, graffiti on walls, or Catholic school?
Whichever one. I don't remember all the routines, but when I see them, I'll remember them. You know.
Okay, let's do Catholic school.
When I went to grade school in a Catholic school, which I really kind of enjoyed. I had a lot of fun there because I came from a poor family. See, in the Catholic schools, they dress all the children alike, so you're not supposed to know who's rich and who's poor, even though rich kids always have a way of letting you know they're rich. The girls come to school wearing a solid gold crucifix. Actual size.
Okay. Talk a little bit about that.
There's a lesson in comedy there. You know, you start out with a believable premise, and the way they dress you, that's all believable. You know, so you're buying into it, at least telling us the truth. And then you say, and the girls come with a solid gold crucifix. Now, notice I didn't say, comes with a solid gold crucifix, actual size. I said, a solid gold crucifix, pause, actual size. You know, the timing of that was right. You know, I again, learning that from being with the comedy team 6 years, you learn about timing, because if you step on your partner's lap, I mean, if he's getting a laugh and you start the next line, you just stepped on his lap. It's knowing the pause there. But, you know, but now I'm patting myself on the back.
That's funny. Let's see it. Let's try nuns fashions.
Okay.
I'm really excited about going back home. I'm going to appear in my old neighborhood, and all my friends will be there, my family, and even the priest and the nuns from my old parish come to see me. And that's kind of exciting because it's an experience to see the nuns now. They don't wear the habits anymore. You know, they wear civilian clothes. Even though they have a very strict dress code, they have to wear a plain dress with a cross-your-heart bra and no-nonsense pantyhose.
Now,
Yeah.
see, today, the kids would look at me and go, what the hell is he talking about? In those days, there were commercials every day on cross-your-heart bras and no-nonsense pantyhose. That's what they were called. You know, it wasn't like I made up those names. There was commercials all the time. That's why the audience reacted to that, because they'd been seeing those commercials, you know. So it was relevant to the times as well, you know.
Let's go for the last one, graffiti on walls.
It was a tough neighborhood. You know you're in a tough neighborhood when you go inside a confessional and there's graffiti on the walls.
Okay.
Graffiti was, at that time, was becoming people writing it on the streets and on overpasses, and it was becoming a problem, you know, in the neighborhood. It was so the neighborhood started to deteriorate when you start seeing graffiti, you know. So it was a relevant joke at that time, you know. Again, you know, and again, you know, going back to the nuns, they would come to my shows sometimes when I go back home. They had a great sense of humor too. I mean, they knew, you know. I give you a quick story. One time I came back and I did, back in my own neighborhood, I did 2 shows at a place called Scrimenti's. And then I did a midnight show called Material I Can't Do on Johnny Carson. And it was not you know, dirty material, but it was risque somewhat that I couldn't do on Johnny Carson. Unbeknownst to me, the mother superior of my grade school came, Sister Madonna Treese. I didn't know she was in the audience. And she, and I did a few things that you couldn't do on the Tonight Show. And as she was leaving, one of the reporters there, a woman named Marlene Cook, saw her and said, "Sister, were you at that show?" She said, "Oh, he's one of my former students, you know." She said, "No, I know that, but Tom got a little bit risque." She said, "Thomas has always been naughty." And I never forgot that. I said, you know what? The rest of my life, if I could get a review that said naughty but nice, you know, you can, there's a difference between naughty and dirty. You know, Johnny Carson could be naughty sometimes on the Tonight Show. But anyhow, they responded well to my material.
So looking at these are, I think these are from the 70s, early 80s. Could you do these today? Would they work today? And if so, why? And if not, why wouldn't you do them? What's changed?
Well, I mean, and they were more relevant. Again, I was a newer comedian in those days. I'm much more mature now, and I could, if I was doing an all Catholic group, I would probably do that material. And I have done that sometimes. I've worked all Jewish audiences in the South and the North. I've worked all Italian audience. I've worked all Irish audience. I've worked all Black audience. I have an album, as I said earlier, in front of an all Black audience. And so now I have a wealth of material now. This would be material. A couple of the jokes I couldn't do because they weren't, again, the No Nonsense Pantyhose, they weren't relevant at that time, very few. Again, some of that material, when I'm watching it now, I realize I haven't done that material in years, but it was relevant for the time.
Well, let's jump over to some political humor. We have one that you did The Son Who Was Gay, and then circa 1986. Do you ever
do the one whose son who was gay?
Okay.
I want to set this up.
You want to set it up before I do it, or?
It was a political joke. At that time, all over in the California area, there was a group of parents who were trying to get this teacher, a guy, off of the school, because I don't know if he taught algebra or what, but he was out of the closet gay. And their thinking was, they felt that if he was teaching them, about algebra, that maybe he would influence their children to become gay or something like that. And I thought that was the most absurd thing that I ever heard of. So this is the joke I did.
Okay, let me run it.
I just bought a home out here. I like California, I really do. I just bought a home out here in Sherman Oaks. I'm a little bit concerned, though, because I checked the school system and I found out that all the teachers there are heterosexual, and I have a son who's gay.
Okay.
Now, you realize the audience they were uneasy with that joke, but I thought, how absurd is that? If you say the guy's teaching algebra, but he happens to be gay, that somehow we're teaching algebra, and he's gay, it'll make the other kids want to be gay. Well, then why don't all heterosexual teachers make a gay kid heterosexual? It was this. Later on, Johnny Carson told me that was a clever joke. He said, I really like that joke. It was a clever joke. My son isn't gay, but my son didn't mind me even telling that joke, but he isn't gay. But I just wanted to make a point. That's a political point that you can make sometimes with a naive looking kind of face, a naive and look kind of approach to it, but you make a point politically.
I would think you could still do that today.
Yeah, I think you could. You probably could. Somehow I went off the air here on you.
No, I got you. Okay. You're on. How about this one circa 1986? Let's take a look at that. Let's jump over to Dave and then we'll wrap, okay?
Sure, whatever you say.
I don't want to sound patronizing, but I think it's time that we have a woman president. I'm serious. I think it's time we have a woman president. Because women will stick to the issues, I'm sure. A woman president would know that you can't solve the problems in other countries until we solve the problems here at home. There's a woman from Florida, Senator Paula Hawkins, brilliant lady. She says if she becomes president of the United States, she's going to put pictures of missing husbands on the side of beer cans. If I was president of the United States, first thing I'm doing, I'm calling in our Secretary of Defense and I'm going to say, look, pal, you got to change your name. No one in the world is going to be afraid of a Secretary of Defense named Casper. I want a Secretary of Defense named Carmine or something like that. Sounds good to me. Although I do like the way he stood up to Gaddafi. See, I could never understand how anybody in their right mind can be afraid of this man, Gaddafi. I mean, this is not a mental giant, folks. I mean, think about what I'm talking about. Here's a guy who owns his own country. He only made himself a colonel. Come on, we got guys in this country who kill chickens. We make them colonels. Now, I saw Caspar Weinberg on the news last night, our Secretary of Defense, and he said we have the strongest military in the world, and he was bragging about the fact that we're now trying to develop a hand grenade that can blow up everything within a 2-mile radius. All we need now is a guy who can throw it and run 3 miles in 5 seconds. And there's spies everywhere now. You read the one spy that fascinated me, this guy named John Walker, was a welder in a shipyard, 18 years. And he was a spy. Now, that didn't fascinate me. What fascinated me was he taught his son to be a spy. I can't get my kid to empty the garbage. And his wife said she didn't know. 3 people in the house, 2 were spies. She didn't know. She wasn't curious when one week he got a $200,000 raise. Now, today in the news, it was in the news today, they found oil in Mexico. And our government came up with a brilliant idea right away. They wanted to build a pipeline. Rather than us deal with the Arab nations, now they're going to build a pipeline from Mexico to Los Angeles. That's stupid. Why don't we just insist that every illegal alien carry 1 quart of oil across the border? Thank you very much.
That's very funny stuff. That's good stuff.
Thank you.
Made himself a colonel. What a dummy. I didn't know this until somebody told me. You used to be a bartender.
Oh, yeah. And shot in beer places on the south side of Chicago, my hometown.
I didn't? No kidding?
A roughhouse joint where you'd serve a beer and break up a fight and serve a beer and break up a fight. But occasionally, I shouldn't say, we had a lot of nice people coming there. But one night, I remember I was reading it, and I was a bartender, and I was reading in a magazine that afternoon that if someone has the hiccups, and that happens a lot in the bar, right, that if you shock them or scare them, the hiccups will go away.
Yeah.
And there's a banquet room in the bar, on the other side of the bar, and a woman came to the bar that night, elegantly dressed. It's true. She said, very nice lady, she said, "What do you recommend for the hiccups?" I said, "I remember you. You're the lady who was arrested for indecent exposure last year." She said, "What?" I said, "The lady who took off all her clothes and the cops had to come because you were naked running through." She said, "I beg your pardon?" And I said, "How about your hiccups?" She said, "I don't have the hiccups. My husband does." He's in the...
We'll be right back.
All right.
That first of all, that's so pleasing to me because I love to make Johnny Carson laugh. And as I like to make Sinatra laugh, I just love to make him laugh. But that you'll see, all of that stuff was in the news at the time. And
Right.
Talking about a woman president. Now that's in the 1980s. You know, Caspar Weinberger was in the news, the Secretary of Defense. Gaddafi was in the news at the time. You know, all of that stuff was in the news. And so I could, you know, and it made it relevant and made it current. You know, and Johnny really liked that, you know. Johnny loved that joke about the spies. It was true. There was a guy in the Philadelphia shipyard, I think it was, that he had been spying for the Russians or something for years, and he taught his son to be a spy. All of that was in the news, and Johnny liked that stuff. One time there was a guy who changed his name legally to a number, and it was in the news. And I walked out on the 10th Street that night, and I said, "Did you see where a guy changed his name legally to a number? You know, what if we all did that? Then we would go in a bakery and take a name." You know, and Johnny thought that was hysterical because it was in the news and it was current, you know.
Well, you know, Tom, I don't know when just about an hour has flown by so quickly. We barely scratched the surface about your life, comedy, but I'd like to, before I formally thank you for being with us again, give you an opportunity to share what are some parting comments you have, because I think it's important. You're not just a comedian, you're also a motivational speaker, but you're also a humanitarian. And I've had the pleasure of working with you on a couple of charity events, and I saw that come through and your passion for helping other people. But let me give you the floor again and share with us a couple of things you'd like us to remember.
Well, you know, that if you're not a funny person, you know, surround yourself around funny people. And again, you will endear yourself to everybody when you learn that a sense of humor is when you have the ability to laugh at your own shortcomings and misfortunes. You can teach your children a sense of humor. They look at you as gods, a mom and dad or a grandma and grandpa, that you can do no wrong. But when you share with them silly, dumb things you did and how embarrassed you were at the time and how everybody laughed at you, they will learn to do that themselves. And again, a sense of humor is when you have the ability to laugh at not at other shortcomings and misfortunes, but at your own. Even some very tragic things can happen in your life, and in a day or two, and you'll end up being able to laugh at that. You know, that's healthy of not taking yourself too serious. I think if psychiatrists probably tell you the number one problem their patients have, we take ourselves too serious. We're really not all that important, you know, in the overall spectrum of things. You know. And the other thing I say is that life is a blink of an eye. You know, in the annals of time, this planet's been here for 5 billion years, according to science. It's going to be here for 5 billion more after you die. So your lifetime on this planet is a blink of an eye, a speck of sand. Oh, it's in the annals of time, it's a blink of an eye. Don't spend that one blink of an eye, that speck of sand, without having a lot of laughs in life. If I could give you a recipe, I'd say laugh out loud 10 times a day. Get up in the morning and start work. The best way to start, look in the mirror, because if that doesn't make you laugh when you first get out of bed, nothing will. But laugh. In acting classes, we had to cry on command or laugh. You know, you know, you can do that. You can. And sometimes when I've got problems on my mind, I go, "What am I gonna do about this?" I'll stop and I'll start laughing. You know, and laugh about those. It's healthy. Again, go to comedy places, see your favorite comedians, laugh. Try to laugh out loud 10 times a day. I promise you, you'll be a better person for it. The people around you will be better for it, and you'll live a lot longer life.
That's great advice. And speaking of that, in addition to your book, Still Standing, which I know is still on Amazon, where are some places that folks might be able to see you coming up, especially if you're going to be on the West Coast? Are there any places you can let us know about?
Well, I always try new material out at the Laugh Factory in Hollywood. You know, I go there and try out new material that's right on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. You can go to my website, tomdreesen.com. You know, Dreesen. Everybody spells my name wrong. They put 2 S's in there, but it's not Dreesen, it's Dreesen. And you can go there and it'll tell you where I'm appearing at, you know, and hopefully I'll be appearing in your area somewhere. You know, become my Facebook friend, and I always let them know where I'm at, you know. And feel free to come up afterward and say hello, and that I saw you on Mike's show, you know, and then I'll know you're following Mike. You know. By the way, after doing your show last time, I sold some more books. The book it's got 255-star reviews.
That's great.
It's a cheap plug, forgive me, but
well, no, it's okay. It's like I said, it just shows, like you said earlier, you've worked yourself all the way up from nowhere to be with me 3 times for the Renaissance Society. We really thank you for that. And I want to thank the Forum Committee again, as I said in the beginning, for having us. This has been a lot of fun. I never know what it's going to be like when Tom and I get going, but as I said, you know, kind of in the middle of this, truly for me, it's a master's class in communication and life and working with Tom. So folks, have a great rest of the day. Have a wonderful weekend. And from Tom and Mike, bye for now. See you again soon.
Well, a big thank you to Tom Dreesen and Mike Agron for making this presentation for us. It is recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel in just a few days after we process it. Now, I've got one other new thing to put up here that I want you all to be aware of that's happening tomorrow. And a matter of fact, if you have a cell phone, pull it out, get that camera function and take a quick picture of your screen, because I want you to remember tomorrow, Saturday, November 6th, from 10 a.m. to noon, you can drop up items at the campus at the CSUS for the Thanksgiving food drive. And they're making food baskets, and what they need are canned vegetables, fruits, cranberry sauce, gravy, and boxed cornbread, mac and cheese, graham cracker pie crust, mashed potatoes, stuffing. Or you can just bring a check and they'll buy what's needed. So the drop-off point is at the Children's Center, and that's over next to the parking structure, that parking garage there. Or you can go to your Google Maps and type in CSUS Child Development Center, and that will show you on the map where it's at. If you can't make it that day, you can contact Alan Keown at ahkeown@gmail.com, and they can arrange to pick up your items for you. So again, try and remember, run out there tomorrow, 10 a.m. to noon, and let's show our support. So next week's forum will be a talk by Rob Stutzman. He's the Deputy Chief of Staff, was the Deputy Chief of Staff for Communications to Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Stephen Maviglio, who was the press secretary for Governor Gray Davis. And they've been following political campaigns for many decades. We've had them on before, and they're always entertaining and educational. They're going to discuss the history of the recall process, the origins of this year's recall effort, and what the result of the Newsom recall process means for California and the nation. So I hope you can join us next week, and we'll see you then.